the Mojave isn't short on beasts, but which New Vegas creature would be the most dangerous in the RL? In this video, we're treating this game as reality. To get a realistic ranking, I'm grading every creature on a 1 to 10 scale, all based on 3 specific criteria. Their physical attributes, so their raw power, speed, and weaponry, their behavioral and environmental traits, how aggressive and territorial they are, and how they interact with human settlements, and just the general likelihood of them being in close proximity to us. And finally, number 3 is their likelihood of zoonotic disease transmission. So if we're actually living in the Mojave Wasteland, which creature would cause the most conflict and harm to us in the bigger picture? Starting with coyotes. They are small to medium-sized canids averaging around 16 to 44 pounds. While their bite force is 88 to about 153 psi, and that is kind of weak compared to even large dog breeds, they are specialized killers. They handle small prey solo, but use the typical pack hunting to take down larger targets like deer. They are opportunistic omnivores, meaning if it provides energy, they'll eat it, kinda like us. Coyotes can be notoriously bold, which can catch people off guard. I've dealt with many coyotes where I live, and they are notorious pet killers, usually killing cats and small to medium-sized dogs. They're also pretty infamous for preying on small livestock, mostly like goats and chickens and stuff like that, but this has earned them a reputation of being vermin to ranchers. While in New Vegas, some packs are depicted as man-eaters like at the Good Springs Cave, real-world predation on people is extremely rare, with only 2 modern recorded cases ever. Most capable adults can fend them off. Coyotes are also very versatile and easily adapt to close proximity to humans, even in urban environments, bumping them up regarding possible livestock predation or, heaven forbid, a lone child. Very large packs could pose a threat to even like Bighorner, like calves or Brahmin calves, but I really do think, especially Bighorners, just them being so massive and the bulls being very defensive of their herd is a very huge deterrent, as they do have complex social structures that protect their own. Because coyotes aren't at the top of the Mojave food chain, they're very far from it, they'd likely be driven closer to human settlements for safety, really, increasing the frequency of wildlife-human conflict and zoonotic disease transmission. Coyotes carry rabies, tapeworms, mange, and distemper, among many other diseases and parasites that can pass to pets like dogs as well. While a seasoned Mojave cowpoke has very little to fear from a single yote, the risk of disease in pack tactics bumps them up, for me, just a little bit on my danger scale, leaving them with a final grade of 2 out of 10. I love Centaurs, they're really cool, and I was really disappointed when they didn't come back in Fallout 4. I'm gonna keep this one as short and brief as possible, to the point. Centaurs wouldn't be much of a threat at all towards us, outside of giving you a heart attack.
What the fuck is that?
Originally created by the Master, they are a chimera of creatures, artificially created by throwing in a bunch of random genes into a FEV vat. And boom, you got these monstrosities. A multi-species of human, dogs, and cats, DNA, and Lord knows what else, gave birth to these grotesque abominations.
They're abominations.
Their lumbering gait that has perhaps the grace of a sloth leaves them extremely vulnerable to any competent cowpoke using a conventional firearm. Outside of their acidic projectile spit, I couldn't see them doing that much damage. Centaurs are also synonymous with super mutants and are typically their pets or guard dogs, so to speak, of some capacity. So if you're bumping into them out in the waste, you have really bigger fish to worry about, as it's highly probable that super mutants are at the very least nearby. They seem to, at least in New Vegas, be somewhat social creatures, as they are often found flocked together communally in largely radiated areas and do inflict radiation with some of their attacks. Centaurs are walking biological disasters. Fusing human, canine, and feline DNA creates a universal bridge for zoonotic diseases to kind of jump species in unlimited sci-fi potential. They could shed viruses or host hyper-resilient mutated parasites of some sort, hypothetically. But I have to give these guys a 3 out of 10 on my grading scale. Yeah, imagine a mantis the size of a large dog. I mean, that would be a mechanical death trap, with their Reaper-esque scissor hands that could eviscerate flesh like butter. Mantises possess 360 degrees telescopic vision and an 180 degrees head rotation. These in a lot of ways are the ultimate wolves in sheep's clothing. They're so metal that real world versions already take down small birds. It's real, look it up. You scale that up and you've got a problem. As much as I love creepy crawlies and reptiles in real life, huge apex predators of these animals would genuinely be terrifying, and I would not go anywhere where they existed. There's just something so inhumane and cold about these animals that heightens the spook factor for me. Real mantises are solitary hunters, but the Mojave variants are different evolutionarily, diverting away from a lone wolf to a hive mind swarm mentality. Originally, the Vault 22 lab-grown organisms meant for natural pest control, which is very real in the RL, as agriculturally, mantises are beloved for their natural pest control. Because of their origin, they've swapped solitary hunting for aggressive swarming. This alongside them being obligate carnivores that lack fear, they set up shop anywhere. This is even shown in Goodsprings in the schoolhouse. In a real-world Mojave, given the right or I guess wrong circumstances, environmental factors in tandem with biological circumstances like nesting could trigger a perfect storm, similar to a locust plague. But this would be a whirlwind of serrated blades, leaving death and destruction in their wake. Disease-wise, mantises would be pretty basic and universal among really all wild animals as pathogenic vectors through their saliva and mandibles. Their forearms are essentially giant dirty needles, or scythes, I guess. A simple scratch could inject Staphylococcus or Salmonella from their last rotting meal directly into your bloodstream. Individually, they're really nothing of a big deal, they're fragile glass cannons. But with the possible stealth ambush tactics when they're by their lonesome, or their more typical swarming hive mindset through pack hunting, gives them a surprisingly high rating of 7 out of 10. Brahmin are the mutated descendants of pre-war Indian cattle based on the real-life cattle that were genetically selected for their natural disease, drought, and insect resistance. Decades of radiation added the mutation of their iconic second head, giving them crazy head game, brah. All of these factors allows them to thrive on the harsh, sparsely abundant Mojave weeds. Brahmin, outside of the obvious of serving the wasteland as cattle, are also employed as pack animals for transporting goods vast distances and are the wasteland's lifeblood in many ways. They provide meat, leather, and milk. While the game makes them weak from a combat design standpoint, being basically jokes of a threat, which I always wanted to see like a dangerous like bull Brahmin in a Fallout that acts as a mid-level threat. It would be really cool to see in a future Fallout 5 whenever that comes out by the time I'm like 90. But all of their genetics have given these bovine longevity to withstand the harsh realities of the day-to-day in the Mojave. They are robustly built animals that sustain entire communities through sustenance and utility. They are even the backbone of the economy financially, as they're often controlled by Brahmin barons, like Heck Gunderson.
Choke on your goodbyes. I'll be here.
And used as the primary beast of burden for the Crimson Caravan Company, to just name one. Though usually passive grazers of the waste, in the real world, you should never underestimate them. Real world cattle, yes cows, kill more people than sharks through blunt force trauma and coordinated assaults on ranchers. It's crazy how many people a year die to cattle alone. In the Mojave, this spooked herd effect makes a Brahmin stampede a literal death sentence. distance. Brahmin are also of course domesticated within Fallout New Vegas and are rarely seen in the wilds, which kind of ties into the real dangers of these moo-moos, and that really is the disease factor. Cattle of course are natural vectors for things like anthrax, E. coli, and even mad cow disease. As mobile petri dishes, one sick Brahmin could theoretically contaminate milk and meat supplies, wiping out a settlement like Goodsprings faster than a raider attack, with an infected Brahmin essentially rotting a community from the inside out. Beyond the biological risk, they fuel a dangerous political corruption among people that's not really the Brahmin's fault, of course, but wealthy Brahmin barons can leverage their control over this essential food source and transport supply to manipulate other factions, creating a monopoly of power. With all of this considered, I feel like overall they earn a 6 out of 10 on my grading scale. Lakelurks are the Mojave's answer to mirelurks, mutated snapping turtles. They've ditched their shells for a bipedal, muscular physique. They got them gains, brah. Their design is a direct, on-the-nose tribute to the 1950s creature from the Black Lagoon. I've actually never seen it, but it really does lean into Fallout's iconic, retro-futuristic aesthetic. They also comically can't attack underwater, which was a huge missed opportunity, but this is due to the engine's limitations, as stated by Joshua Sawyer, rather than oversight. Lakelurks weirdly are categorized as animals in Fallout New Vegas, but for whatever reason, they remain hostile towards you even if you have the perk Animal Friend. Being the Mojave's drowners, I don't know, they always reminded me of drowners from Witcher 3, living in small to massive packs near Lake Mead and any other waterway, with them usually preferring pristine water, which could also be an indicator that a healthy Lakelurk population could indicate a healthy water system. Like real snapping turtles, they are likely obligate carnivores, hunting fish or working together to pick off land-based prey along the shore. Their riparian nature, operating on both land and water, makes hydration a high-stakes gamble for travelers, a gamble fitting of New Vegas. However, their reliance on water makes them very predictable. They won't storm inland settlements because they'd likely dry out under the blistering desert sun. Most of the diseases from Lakelurks would be, it would be pretty, standard of any other wild creature. That would be through consumption of their meat, i.e. undercooked meat and parasites, or scratches and wounds inflicted upon battling them, and perhaps hypothetically, they could dirty waterways if their populations got really high, with their excrement and something like that could cause illness for a wastelander who was desperate enough for a drink of water without purifying it beforehand. With all of this being pretty standard in terms of disease risks, they score extremely low overall at a grading scale of 2 out of 10. Engineered in the Big MT and perfected in Vault 22, Sporeplants are mutated predatory Venus flytraps designed for biological defense. Visually, they consist of a thick, fleshy green stalk tapped with a toothy serrated mouth that can fire high-velocity barbs or corrosive enzymes at intruders. While they are stationary and often act as sentries of some sort, they are incredibly hardy, boasting total immunity to poison and radiation. Their lore is defined by a catastrophic failure in Vault 22, where they escaped alongside a parasitic fungus to infest regions like Zion Canyon. The obvious inspiration behind these dudes, aesthetically, I assume, was from the Little Shop of Horror film with the "Feed me, Seymour, feed me.
Must be fresh."
Venus flytrap, and of course they're just mutated Venus flytraps. Spore plants are very basic as far as life forms go, so there's no real reason to ramble on about them for too long. They post up and spit at just about anything that comes within distance. I can't really see these carnivorous plants being a threat by and large, with their stationary nature, and they are in a very few select locations around the wasteland even to begin with. The primary dangers that the Feed Me Seymour pose to the wasteland is their role as a source of the, I don't know how to pronounce this, but I'm gonna try, it's the Beauveria mordicana, which is a parasitic fungus fungus that triggers a lethal pneumonia-like respiratory infection. Once inhaled, these spores cause racking cough and rapid organ failure. The threat is compounded by the fact that the fungus reanimates its victims into spore carriers. But these spore carriers act as feral husks that actively spread the contagion, both of them having, of course, a symbiotic relationship. So this does present a viral risk. The plants act as aggressive stationary sentries, and their ability to thrive in irradiated hot zones makes them somewhat of a persistent environmental hazard in some locations. But I feel like due to their rarity and stationary nature in general, leaves these feed me at a respectable 2 out of 10, maybe even a 1, but I feel like 2 was good. Oh baby, the daddy Deathclaw. I mean, Deathclaws are Fallout. They are the DNA of this game. Name another creature that defines Fallout more than a Deathclaw, right? You'd think Deathclaws would be straight up, right? Like, just label them a 10 and call it a day. The undisputed kings of dangerousness. But fascinatingly enough, it's more complex than that with these genetically engineered apex predators. They're massive, up to 12 feet bipedal predators, and they were originally engineered from Jackson's chameleon's DNA to be kind of like the ultimate close combat weapon in the form of the ultimate super soldiers. They're extremely fast, their hides are resistant to small arms, their raw power is capable of shredding even power armor to shreds. Beyond brute force, their tactical intelligence and social hierarchies make them highly coordinated hunters rather than just mindless beasts. Where they get interesting is I really do fully believe in the bigger picture, Deathclaws are what's kind of called like a heart of the forest species. The heart of the forest is just kind of a saying, it's like a term for animals that typically need vast expanses of remote wilderness, faring poorly when in close proximity to humans, generally speaking, with real life studies even proving that certain animal species like wolves, brown bears, lions, and tigers, oh my, suffer increased cortisol levels that spike around people. Basically, they get stressed the hell out, and it even reduces their overall lifespan. Deathclaws do have very complex social hierarchies and are very intelligent. Now, in terms of this like heart of the forest species, there are exceptions to this rule within New Vegas, and you really do see this in the case of Quarry Junction, as they basically came in like they own the place, driving off the quarry workers with the attitude of "come at me, brah." So when they do have their heart set on a place, this so-called heart of the forest type species can be situational. But the sudden move into the quarry actually is explained in game, as the powder gangers took over the NCR correctional facility in the form of a revolt. This caused a shortage of dynamite that Sloan was using to break up rocks for the extraction of the quarry's resources. With the dynamite restricted, this caused an abrupt halt in the loud explosions within the quarry that were otherwise keeping the nearby population of Deathclaws at bay. But by and large, Deathclaws don't seek out confrontation outside of maintaining their territory and hunting. Deathclaws present minimal disease risks due to their FEV engineered biology, which makes them resistant to most pathogens. While a lucky survivor that actually survives an attack from a Deathclaw could face sepsis from a wound or some other bacterial infection, the immediate threat that these badasses pose is entirely physical and direct rather than biological. Because they are localized and don't spread plagues, they rank lower on a societal scale despite being a 10 out of 10 in a face-to-face confrontation. Overall, giving these beasts a 7 out of 10 threat level. From one apex predator to the next, we got the spliced rattlesnake coyote hybrids of the Mojave. One of my favorite personal enemies, and that is the Nightstalker. Possessing the body of a coyote, the head and tail of a rattlesnake is such a cool enemy. Since their head is in fact that of a rattlesnake, they would possess heat-seeking pit organs. Pit organs in pit vipers are specialized infrared sensing receptors, located in facial pits between their eyes and nostrils nostrils and are used to detect infrared and track and strike warm-blooded prey, even in total darkness, and are very dangerous in close quarters where they typically inhabit. Being lethal rattlesnake coyote spliced hybrids engineered none other than by Dr. Boreas at the Big MT, and despite claims from him that they were sterile, they escaped and became a rapidly breeding apex predator across the Mojave. They could theoretically function as kind of like apex urban predators, largely owing to their coyote DNA, mirroring real-world coyotes by habituating to human settlements to raid livestock, even become possible man-eaters in the process once they start to grow more bold. Their tendency to utilize tight spaces like caves and other hollowed out natural structures as their lair makes them invisible neighbors that could learn human schedules, turning every night walk into a game of Russian roulette. With their nocturnal pack hunting tactics and a name possibly inspired by the infamous serial killer, they aren't just wild animals, they are a permanent, bold threat lurking right beneath your feet, so to speak. In a realistic scenario, Nightstalkers could be zoonotic bridges between reptilian and mammalian pathogens. Even a non-lethal warning nip, if that ever occurred, would likely lead to catastrophic multi-species infections that would be nearly impossible to treat in an already desperate wasteland. Nightstalkers earn a 8 out of 10 because they are the ultimate silent killer. Geckos are mutated bipedal reptiles that have a really funny gait, like they look freaking hilarious when they run. They feature a pair of distinctive fins or frills behind their heads and have evolved 5 fingers and 5 toes. Like real-world geckos, they lack eyelids and use their long tongues to clear debris from their orange-tinted eyes. They have a hunched posture and walk permanently on their hind legs, being bipedal. They are highly agile and known for their unique swimming animations, which is pretty cool. They coo, squeak, and do kind of like a chirp. Represents some social interactions between one another and are commonly found in small to medium-sized packs on average. Geckos vary between subspecies, however. They're very similar but very distinct as well, mostly due to their properties and their colorization. You have common geckos, golden geckos, fire geckos, and green geckos, but the green geckos we're not going to talk about because they're only found in Zion Canyon. The common geckos are your standard run-of-the-mill geckos of the Mojave. They are the weakest variant and largely pose no significant risk for the player, generally speaking. They have a silvery kind of like white tinted hide and are run into from the very beginning of the game, as already mentioned. Golden geckos are a bit larger, have a majestic golden hued hide, and are very deadly as they do really surprisingly high DPS. Even with a high leveled, well armored courier, they can catch you slipping. They also deal a decent amount of radiation damage, which is pretty unique among enemies, so if you're running like a Radchild build, it's something to be aware of. And then lastly, we have the fire geckos, which oddly are labeled in game as abominations, so you can't friend zone them with the perk animal friend for whatever reason. They have a dark mottled purple reddish tinged hide and come strapped with dragon's breath. They got that fire inside as well, being completely immune to fire. They are literally little dragons living up to their reputation, and these scaly boys seem to establish hunting territory and perhaps even have social structures with maybe young males serving the role of hunters, as seen by the variant that prowls around called gecko hunters. Attracted to water and food, I mean like any other biological organism, puts them in the crossfire heavily with human territory. Their prolific nature makes them the most common source of animal injuries in towns like Goodsprings, and they could also be a threat towards livestock in big enough packs, turning a simple task like, gathering water or herbs into a lethal ambush. Being cold social reptiles that bask in the sun and hunt in packs, their downright adorable stature and just general look makes them an unassuming yet dangerous foe. Geckos present, I'd say, a bit above average versus some of the other creatures we've talked about in terms of disease risk, acting as primary vectors for both environmental toxicity and infectious diseases, depending on the subspecies. Beyond their, obvious, like their aggressive pack hunting, they pose a severe risk through their waste. By nesting near shared water sources, their excrement could contaminate water sources with parasites and other pathogens that could cause dysentery and other such nastiness. Golden geckos take this further as mobile radiation hazards, bringing the fallout via a mobile meat bag. Fire geckos could also inflict severe thermal trauma that could torch down structures with their built-in flamethrowers. Like most other wild animals, any survivor of a physical attack still faces a high risk of sepsis from their bacteria-laden bites. But I can't really see them being, any more than a lot of other things on this list in that kind of way. And I'd overall summarize, they're a pretty moderate risk, depending on the size of the established population. And grouping all of these subspecies together for the sake of this video, I'd say overall, a respectable, I'd say 6 out of 10 is a reasonable grade for these cute but tenacious scaly lizards. Hard to hit, easy to kill, these maggot-spitting grotesque insects are a common sight around graveyards and other waste-filled radiated areas all over the Mojave and pose an interesting spot for this video. They got the face and body only a mother could love and the aura of a wet paper bag blowing in the wind, yet I'd say they are the lesser, like stepbrother of the radroach in a lot of ways in terms of, being emblematic recognition within the Fallout series. Bloatflies are hideous, engorged balloon flies that use a unique scent gland to maintain high-speed flight velocity. Descended from the pre-war bloatflies and horseflies, they have evolved a gruesome predatory cycle that often isn't really seen in-game for obvious reasons. They gestate their young internally in their abdomens and then use that as living ammunition. They go boom boom with their babies. Fired from a distended stinger, these barbed larvae burrow into targets and release neurotoxins to paralyze prey, effectively turning the victim into a living food source for the growing brood. The threat that bloatflies present in game is literally nothing. Outside of the apex of apex predators, the legendary bloatfly, which is found in the Big MT. Like standard bloatflies, it's like impossible to die from them. I mean, it's not literally, but it feels like that. I don't think I've ever died to a bloatfly. Like real life flies, they have a habit of getting down and dirty, often found in disgusting environments. Being genetic descendants of the common housefly, which are primarily scavengers, is kind of set with the duality of it being related also to the blood-feeding horseflies. To my knowledge, bloatflies in-game, like in the lore, are incapable of actually biting due to their gargantuan size, but the nightmare fuel that bloatflies primarily present is myiasis, which if you ever want to feel tingles of ick down your spine, go ahead and Google it. I wouldn't recommend it. Myiasis, which I won't be showing pictures of, is a parasitic infection where maggots infest the tissue by either burrowing directly into the skin or take advantage of open wounds, and is primarily only a reality where certain species of flies exist, which is usually in tropical and subtropical regions of the world. It is legit horrifying. Where this all comes into the equation for our subject at hand is the bloatfly launches mature spine-covered larvae that function like living harpoons, anchoring into the target's flesh upon impact to trigger myiasis for reproductive and predatory purposes, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. This burrowing triggers a biological cascade. As the larvae rot your flesh from the inside, they introduce lethal pathogens directly into your bloodstream, leading to localized necrosis, sepsis, and potentially fatal systemic infections. Realistically, in a real-world setting, this would be a problem, but could also easily be obfuscated through certain apparel like, Kevlar, masks and goggles and other heavy-duty apparel that kind of would prevent this. It would likely be a thing, it'd be like, there's bloatflies around here, Timmy. Go get the vest. Bloatflies function as a biological bomb. Fitting a Fallout, right? Serving as airborne shuttles for a cocktail of lethal diseases compounded by their likely large populations they would achieve through reproduction on preying on small to medium-sized animals. By them also frequenting waste and carrion, they would also contaminate water sources and food supplies with enteric pathogens like typhoid and cholera every time they land, and just generally in the unhygienic conditions of the wastes, primary mechanical vectors for respiratory bacteria like tuberculosis, making every encounter a gamble with systemic infection. They're nasty, man. Just like in real life, it's often the most benign organisms that wreak the most destruction on life upon the world, giving the bloatfly the highest rating as of yet for this video, at a grading scale of 9 out of 10. I know, it's kind of crazy when you think about it, right? From 6 legs to 8, we have the mutated emperor scorpions that are rad scorpions, and kind of combining them together, the mutated bark scorpion that of course is the native radiated species or mutated species of the Arizona bark scorpion. Rad scorpions are the mutated descendants of the North American emperor scorpion, which are commonly kept as pets all over the world. Unlike their pre-war ancestors, radiation, of course, has ballooned them to the size of small vehicles in the case of the giant ones, reinforcing their carapaces into basically like natural plate armor, resistant to even small arms. They retain their iconic predatory silhouette, 2 massive bone-crunching pincers and a thick segmented tail tipped with a lethal venom-injecting stinger. Their physiology is built for pure durability and power, making them kind of like the tanks of the Mojave Wasteland. Their venom is a fast-acting neurotoxin that causes rapid paralysis and respiratory failure. This toxicity of our city is so stable and concentrated that it remains potent even after the creature's death, allowing it to be repurposed by wastelanders, even used medicinally in the case of anti-venom. In Prim, for example, Ruby Nash utilizes the venom glands as a key ingredient in her famous casserole.
And I'll get to baking a whole batch of casseroles.
I would not eat that. Proving that with the right preparation, kind of like pufferfish I guess, even the Mojave's deadliest chemical payload can be turned into a staple home meal. Bark scorpions are the smaller, more elusive cousins of the rad scorpion, trading mass for superior venom and I guess stealth. While they lack the armored bulk to storm a settlement, they could be arguably more dangerous owing to their more significantly more potent venom. Their neurotoxins are more concentrated than the rad scorpions, making a single sting a rapid death sentence. I also believe that they have the highest dot tick on any venom, discounting stacked stings from Cazadors. They function less like tanks and more like biological landmines, hiding in the dark corners of ruins or underbrush where you'll never see them coming. The obvious inspiration behind rad scorpions just being within the Fallout universe is really grounded in absolute realism. Scorpions are extremely durable, hardy creatures that have been found near nuclear testing sites at Ground Zero and suffered no detrimental effects from the radiation that would kill practically every other organism. Inspiration that fueled these iconic Fallout baddies, as well as, of course, the radroaches. Rad scorpions and bark scorpions are prolific breeders, nesting in massive underground burrows or rocky crevices where they guard their young. Although this isn't seen in game, scorpions do give live birth and keep their young on their backs. As they mature, these territorial predators spread across the Mojave, favoring vast, open spaces as their personal hunting grounds. For settlers, they are a everyday reality. Their ability to tunnel, although not seen in New Vegas due to the game's, engine limitations being a product of its time, means they can bypass walls and emerge directly inside a town's perimeters. That's a problem. Unlike simple pests, their presence can effectively cut off vital trade routes and water sources, as their armored carapace makes them, nearly impossible to kill for like the average citizen, you really do need heavy duty ordnance. In game, they can be seen straight out of the gate in the unmarked location that is Scorpion Gulch, or Scorpion Valley, I can't remember what it's called, but it's just east of the Good Springs graveyard, hammering home just how matter of fact they are in the wastelands day to day. Rat scorpions are kind of a weird one in this video, and just scorpions, bark scorpions in general, because I've personally had scorpions in the past as pets, and I feel like overall, scorpions would rather set up shop, so to speak, maintaining semi-permanent territories, favoring their food to basically come to them like DoorDash, rather than expending, massive amounts of energy in seeking out prey overall. There will be some issues, like with any predator in this video, such as, settlements, keeping potential prey, or attractants, bringing potential prey closer to settlements, but they would kind of fall into this dichotomy of being docile arachnids that would be very easy to coexist alongside versus, under the wrong circumstances, dangerous monstrosities. Their ability to burrow would make them that much more dangerous, as they could bypass settlement security measures entirely. A wall could stop a raider, but other measures would have to be taken into account to stop a car-sized scorpion from springing up from the ground in the middle of the town square. The most direct threat that these mutated scorpions would pose, of course, is their venom. Their stingers act as dirty needles also, which is pretty standard, you know, injecting soil-borne bacteria that could trigger, again, sepsis, necrosis, heart failure, and in some individuals, anaphylactic shock. I feel like overall bark scorpions would be much more docile towards, you know, humans in general, and would likely subsist on mole rats and giant rats, largely avoiding bigger animals like humans even altogether. And bark scorpions also would likely not overlap with rad scorpions, as cannibalism is very common among scorpions. This altogether brings rad scorpions and bark scorpions as a whole to a respectable 6 out of 10. Woof woof, motherfucker. It's man's best friend. None other than dogs in Fallout New Vegas. And of course, they're highly valued as companions, hunters, and guardians, possessing physical traits that have helped them survive the harsh conditions of the Mojave. They're most often seen employed as, like, you know, police dogs by the NCR or warhounds by the Legion. Also, of course, you have the infamous puppers Cheyenne, owned by Good Springs resident Sunny Smiles, is likely the first four-legged friend you'll run into. Most dogs in the Mojave, including, you know, the common wild dogs and pets, share a specific look based on the Australian cattle dog, or the blue heeler. Key features are short, rugged coats with black, blue, and reddish tan markings. They are very athletic quadrupeds, capable of reaching high speeds to chase down prey. Just like the real world, dogs are bred and have a soul link with people. Largely around the Mojave, there seems to be much less feral populations than there was demonstrated in the capital wasteland within Fallout 3. Dogs are just dogs, you know, there's not really much to talk about them. They're either good boys or bad boys, depending on the context. And in the worst case, grim scenario, at the end of the day, this is a dog-eat-dog world, so they could be used as food. You can go I Am Legend on your lovable pet, and yeah. In the Mojave, domestic dogs serves as a dangerous biological vector that can actually transmit lethal diseases to its owner. Without pre-war vaccinations, would be the primary carriers of rabies, a virus that is effectively a death sentence for any human bitten or licked by an infected puppers. Feral populations also would have a high tendency to scavenge and dig, which would also, you know, make them mobile sponges for environmental hazards. Overall, I flip-flopped a bit with my grading scale, but I feel like overall dogs present a solid 5 out of 10. Cazadors are gargantuan, genetically mutated tarantula hawk wasps. They're synthetically created lab experiments, a product of Dr. Boreas, again, in the Big MT. They're blue-black insects roughly the size of a large dog, distinguished by 4 vibrant, beautiful amber wings and terrifying blood-red eyes. They look like Mothman. Their spiky abdomens house a massive, dagger-like retractable stinger used to inject lethal neurotoxins through fast, agile, successive stings. Cazadors are highly aggressive pack hunters that dominate rocky outcroppings and desert canyons. They are notorious for their relentless behavior, often nesting in large swarms around high elevated points like Bonnie Springs or the mountains near Good Springs and Jacobstown. Unlike many wasteland predators that wait for an ambush, Cazadors do actively seek out prey with incredible speed and agility, using their erratic flight patterns alongside their potent venom and numbers to overwhelm prey. Cazadors present a dual threat to the Mojave human population, acting as both a lethal apex predator and a mobile biological hazard. Like anything else on this list, they also can have bacteria on their stingers that would be vectors for systemic sepsis. By moving rapidly between habitats, they effectively bridge the gap between infected wildlife and human settlements, turning a physical encounter into a potential long-term public health crisis, and it's more compounded due to Cazadors at least being predictable within their established nesting territories. So overall, they present a problem as they are shown to nest in close proximity to humans and even violently take over settlements such as the bootlegger's shack and even the counterfeit cap shack, which gives these beastly bugs a solid 8 out of 10. A mole, mole, mole. Like that Austin Powers skits, we got the mole rats, and they are, of course, mutated, naked mole rats. And just like the real world counterparts, these guys are actually really crazy badass. I actually learned a little bit about these dudes not too long ago. They have extremely high longevity because they're just resilient through several unique kind of like superpowers, honestly. They are virtually immune to cancer and are the subject for a lot of cancer research actually, due to a thick molecular sugar that prevents tumors from forming and have cells that stop dividing before they can become dangerous. They can survive without oxygen for nearly 20 minutes by switching to like a plant-like fructose metabolism, and they possess constant mortality risk, meaning they don't physically decline as they age, which is freaking crazy, man. It's like Benjamin Button in here. Additionally, they are the only cold-blooded mammal. Yes, they're cold-blooded mammals, saving energy by huddling together for warmth, and have evolved a complete immunity to acid-based pain. They're just basically biological badasses in a nutshell, really. Fallout New Vegas' mole rats, being large mutated versions of these real-world animals, likely share similar or even enhanced forms of these traits through their radiated mutations. In a fight, they use their oversized front teeth to lunge at targets with surprising speed. They are pretty much aesthetically one-to-one to the real-life counterparts, except like most creatures in this universe, they're on steroids, they're scaled up, right? Often coming in small colonies in game that also kind of alludes to that they do live largely a subterranean lifestyle, as you see burrows near them a lot of the times. Of course, you only see them on the surface, only later seeing their burrowing capabilities alongside rad scorpions mechanically in game with Fallout 4. Mole rats typically hunt in family packs of 3 to 7, often led by a few adults protecting several smaller mole rat pups. While they are almost blind, they do compensate with highly developed senses of smell and hearing to detect movement. While they're mostly savage beasts, they can be domesticated, and the most primary example of this is Snuffles. Mole rats overall present, more run-of-the-mill kind of standard stuff, but they also have the element of having, being introduced to subterranean pathogens in radioactive waste. Unventilated tunnels make them primary vectors for respiratory fungal infections, again, like valley fever, while their mouths harbor aggressive bacteria that can trigger systemic sepsis or rat bite fever from a single chomp chomp. Additionally, they carry internal parasites like everything else, and due to them being largely predictable and overall not physically imposing, I'd rank mole rats at a 2 out of 10 on my scale. Giant ants are massive mutated ants. I know, crazy, right? Armor-plated insects roughly the size of a large hog, characterized by a thick segmented exoskeleton that is naturally resistant to small arms fire. Their heads feature large compound eyes and long antennae that switch to detect vibrations, flanked by powerful scissor-like mandibles capable of crushing bone. Most variants, such as the soldier or worker ant, have a dull brownish black carapace, while the notorious fire ant displays a vibrant reddish-orange hue, indicating its ability to project streams of flame. They possess 6 sturdy jointed legs that provide surprising traction on uneven terrain, allowing them to swarm over obstacles with relentless speed. Giant ants are highly social, of course, hive-minded predators that operate with a single-minded focus on the survival and expansion of their colony. Their behavior is characterized by relentless aggression and coordination. They rarely hunt alone, instead using pheromone trails to summon reinforcements and swarm intruders. When a colony decides to expand, scouts identify resource-rich areas such as abandoned towns, power stations, or rocky canyons, and the swarm then systematically clears out existing inhabitants through sheer attrition in overwhelming numbers, even taking down something like a giant rad scorpion through sheer numbers alone, showcasing how ants also come out on top in the real world. Once a location is secured, they establish deep, subterranean nests where a central queen produces eggs at a rapid rate, effectively cementing their control over the surrounding territory. These environments quickly become death traps for travelers and caravan companies, as the ants aggressively patrol the perimeter of their nest, turning once habitable areas into fortified insect strongholds. Disease risk kind of like transmittable diseases. The only thing, it's very standard for ants, I feel like. They're kind of like mobile vectors for like the usual, you know, salmonella and other kind of bacterial infections that they could spread around on their little legs. Everyone knows that ants are also very attracted to picnics. So I feel like this would really elevate their potential as a risk, you know, in terms of like settlements if they had a food source. With wastelanders out in the wilds, almost needing to essentially ant-proof their food, you know, kind of like how you bear-proof. Similar to fire geckos, the fire ants could literally burn down structures and just torch your freaking house, brah. So there's that obvious danger for them as well. Most of the danger is gonna come from immediate physical threat, right? I'd say overall, ants are really hard to grade because I could see them at like a 10, honestly. I feel like overall, a 7 out of 10 is fair, you know? Bighorners are robustly built ungulates of the Mojave, rocking massive horns that serve dually as a sign of status within the herd and for territorial courtship fighting between males to see who's the biggest giga-chad. Their tightly curved horns grow continuously throughout their life and do present a risk for any would-be predator. They possess wide-set eyes that provide nearly a 300-degree arc of vision, common in a lot of herbivores. Evolutionary is a trait, you know, against possible threats around them. They have thick, shaggy fur that ranges from light to tan dark to like kind of like a dark brown and helps them stay warm and insulate them from the cold in the higher elevated habitats they typically inhabit. A notable mutation is their gross facial appearance. It looks very odd, where the skin around the muzzle is often worn away or like, I don't know, it looks kind of like there's like open wounds or sores or something, leaving their teeth permanently exposed. They actually do look pretty terrifying, but are pretty calm, stoic beasts overall that host a peaceful demeanor despite their appearances, as long as you keep a respectable distance between them and their young. Easy Pete has even stated that they are primarily ranched for food and leather, similar to Brahmin, and you see this as early as Good Springs itself, of course, but they aren't very good pack animals, as he puts it. They simply kind of just lie down when you put a pack on them, like some cats when you try to put a harness on them, you know? They are most commonly found in small to medium-sized herds, preferring elevation throughout their ranges, similar to the real-world mountain goats that these beasts are descended from. This overall gives them, you know, a vantage point against any possible threats in the distance and can make getting away that much easier. They are also very adept climbers when push comes to shove. The close proximity to domesticated bighorners and settlements makes them very similar to Brahmin in a lot of ways, being potential risk for zoonotic disease vectors that could easily spread to ranchers and therefore the rest of the population. I feel like bighorners, however, are pretty competent and are much less domesticated than Brahmins due to their wild genetic lineage. Their complex social structures that has the bulls defending the calves makes predation much less likely than something with like a Brahmin, but it's still never zero, giving the bighorners, generally speaking, one less of a point than Brahmins at 5 out of 10 overall. Even non-Fallout fans are probably aware of radroaches. Outside of Deathclaws, the Pip-Boy, and these iconic critters, it doesn't get much more Fallout than a radroach. They're often the butt of the joke within the games, as these giant roaches, mutated from of course the American cockroach, are pretty much identical to their real-life inspiration. Typically reaching the size of like a large domestic cat, they possess a broad, flattened body protected by a tough, shiny brown exoskeleton. Their anatomy includes a reinforced thorax designed to ward off attacks. They have very small heads and hypersensitive input antennae that detect any movement in any other sensory input needed for the creature's survival. Radroaches will eat just about anything. Anything's a buffet to these guys and are not above scavenging, of course. While they do possess wings, most variants are incapable of true flight. Radroaches are on the very bottom of the totem pole alongside bloatflies in terms of in-game threats. And even in this video where we're taking realism into effect, they're just even on the bottom even then, honestly. Outside of their droppings posing possible allergies, the only thing roaches are really dangerous for, even in heavy infestations, is the spreading of bacteria like salmonella through cross-contamination, by traveling over filth then trekking it elsewhere. And the same applies for radroaches. They're really not anything special, or you know what I mean? They kind of fall within the same perimeters of a lot of these creatures we've talked about. And them lacking any direct physical threat, they are they're not imposing, they're not formidable, really only leaves them with the role of being common pests at most. Overall, this makes them the lowest ranking creature in this video, and I give them a 1 out of 10 in the waste. Keeping the customary animals on steroids theme is the same effect with these mutated pre-war rodents of gargantuan size. Giant rats have a light brown, tannish kind of hue about them with an overall shade of almost a cream colored white. Their most striking feature is definitely their glowing turquoise or blue eyes, which makes them easily visible in the dark environments they typically prefer, such as sewers or caves. As you'd expect, they are nimble, fleet-footed, agile omnivores that will eat just about anything, similar to the radroaches in that regard. They can get quite large, with the typical variants being a bit bigger than the standard large domestic house cat, and the rodents of unusual size being formidable foes that should be avoided at all costs. They possess exceptionally large incisors used for biting and tearing through prey, which makes them extremely destructive for the sake of this video in a lot of ways. As in real life, rats cause billions of dollars, yes, with a B, actually $26+ billion a year, which is freaking crazy. This damage is caused through chewing of primarily wires, but also other important infrastructure that is a real problem in the real world. I mean, imagine what a giant mutated rat could do, right? Giant rats are largely opportunistic scavengers, but will hunt small prey as well. Mice and just rodents in general are very intelligent animals, with some of their cognitive capacities rivaling that of some of the smartest animals on the planet. They are highly social creatures, which can be a breeding ground for disease among populations and furthering unsanitary conditions. This is commonly displayed under Freeside, as the sewer tunnels are infested with probably the largest population of giant rats you see in game. Rats in the real world are probably the most successful animal on the planet, like period. Rats also contaminate and feast upon crops, causing devastating agricultural losses worldwide, as they would be like a moth to the flame regarding any food sources, and they love grains and corn to death, presenting another danger as well. Giant rats really are a premier biological hazard of the Mojave because they occupy the filthiest environments, foraging through dirty, damp sewers and trash heaps, serving as a bridge between waste and human settlements for possible zoonotic infections. The potential for this is endless. Their bites would also be very nasty vectors for rat bite fever and systemic sepsis. This risk is historically grounded in the real world by the bubonic plague, aka the Black Death, which killed millions in the 14th century. While rats were not the direct source of the bacteria, they acted as the essential transport system for the infected fleas that were really the main culprit. These fleas would live in the rat's fur, and once the rat host dies, jump to humans to feed, injecting the bacteria into their bloodstream. In the Mojave, giant rats fulfill this same role potentially, with the chaos-induced world leaving sanitation as nothing but a mere luxury. To tally all this up, in their mangy coats could be ideal habitats for some kind of weird mutated flea that could easily trigger a localized plague outbreak in densely populated areas like Freeside, the Strip, or even contaminating crops at the NCR sharecropper farms. The sheer economic and structural damage caused by giant rats would be insane, primarily by accelerating the collapse of fragile infrastructure, by gnawing through the insulation of pre-war or even post-war electrical grids and irrigating piping systems, putting even more damage on resources that are already very expensive in this new world, as factions rage on in the tides of war. Furthermore, the destruction of food security is devastating. Rats would target and consume, then contaminate massive portions of grain and seed, leading to localized famines and skyrocketing prices for basic rations, leaving these populations even more vulnerable to the very diseases that the rats carry, along with the loss of supplies. Along with disease transmission, their constant chewing and their destructive behaviors while doing so turns them into a decivilizing force that drains the Mojave of its few remaining resources, making them, in my opinion, the most dangerous Mojave critter that would throw a wrench in the prosperity of its human inhabitants, giving them a 10 out of 10. This makes giant rats the most dangerous at first place, bloatflies taking second place, and nightstalkers for third place, with the honorable mention of the mix of Cazadors, deathclaws, and manti in fourth.